grace, and peace. I've got the lights turned low and the shadows turned way up because we are talking about The Lighthouse, the movie that came out this past year. I missed in theaters, but man, I love Willem Dafoe and I really wanted to check it out. But this movie is stretching my capabilities in terms of interpretation. If you have not watched this channel before, I'm the movie pastor. I have a movie pass. I watch a ton of movies, and I'm always thinking theologically about them. My goal when I watch a movie is to pay attention to what is it really saying? What's the deeper meaning? And then, is that deeper meaning true or not? How do I relate with that as a minister of Jesus Christ and as a follower of Jesus, as a Christian in my life? What does it say, and what do I do with it? I have interpreted a lot of texts in my life, but The Lighthouse defies interpretation. And that is so weird. I mean, all over the internet, you can Google and you can search interpretations of The Lighthouse, meaning, explanation, and everyone has got a different theory from everyone else. I mean, the plot of The Lighthouse is reasonably simple. This guy, Robert Pattinson's character, Winslow, goes to an island where another lighthouse operator, Wake, is already working, and he's supposed to train under the older guy, but instead they both kind of descend into madness. Wake won't let Winslow see the light and operate the light at the top of the tower, and then Winslow kills Wake and then looks at the light and then falls down the stairs, and the last scene of the movie, he's dead. Spoiler alert, by the way. Shoot. Anyway, the interpretation of that is where things get interesting. What's the significance of that? Why have we just watched for 3 hours these guys that it seemed like 3 hours? I don't know the actual runtime, but what is it for? What's the significance? Because it must be significant. I mean, the shadows and the painstaking way it was shot in black and white using old cinema techniques, and the acting. I mean, it's worth mentioning twice. So Willem Dafoe just giving some of the best acting in his career. Robert Pattinson, Edward from Twilight, keeping up with him. What for? What's it mean? And it doesn't mean anything, because it means everything. Because if you go into the internet, you'll see people saying, "Oh, you know what I think? I think it's Jungian archetypes. I think there's an id and an ego and a superego, and there's the light and the shadow, and it's all Freud. It's about psychology, psychoanalytic practice." And you have other people saying, "No, it's mythology. It's Prometheus, and he's stealing fire from the gods, and the fire comes from the gods, and you're punished for it. And it's Sisyphic, and so that's why at the end the birds are pecking out the organs." And none of them really fit all the way, and none of them fail to fit in any way. You can see how they all kind of match up. It feels important. The way it's shot like something that is important. The way it's directed, the way it's written, the dialogue. It sounds like it ought to be symbolic, it ought to be representative, it ought to be meaningful, but what does it mean? And am I just too stupid? I mean, I'm a pretty experienced interpreter of text, not to toot my own horn, but there's a lot that I'm not good at. But one thing I have a lot of experience in is like watching movies and figuring out what they say. That's like what I do. And then for a job, I read ancient Near Eastern texts and I figure out what they say and I explain them in ways people can understand, but I don't know what this says. Of course, if it can say anything, we can interpret it to mean whatever we want to. That's most of what it seems to me people have done. And so could I make it biblical? Well, of course I can. Of course I can take a blank slate of a text and make it theological. I mean, we've got water in the lighthouse. We've got light in the lighthouse. So like there's two easy symbols right there. And what happens to Thomas Winslow? Well, he proceeds through the waters of baptism to an island. So that island has to represent the people of God. The island has to represent the church. That's where you end up after you're baptized, and in the church militant, and held by the church militant, maintained by the church is this light. And the light is a beacon to many that represents safety. The light is truth. The light is Christ. But Winslow's prevented from going to the light. And why can't he go to the light? What's preventing him? Well, the old guard is wake. The Christians that were there before he arrived, they want him to stay on the island and to get drunk and to do a bunch of tasks and to warm seats and to complement their cooking, but they don't want him to go to the light. They want to keep that for themselves. And so what does Winslow have to do? Well, he has to kill him. Yet he has to first admit who he is. He has to come to his true identity, but then he's got to get rid of the old guard, reject the old guard, reject everything that keeps him from the light. I mean, that's an interpretation. You could interpret it that way, but I don't think it's right. I just made that up. That wasn't in the movie. That was something I just did right there. I just spun a yarn for you. Maybe my text is good, right? Maybe this video is meaningful because I just said that, and that sounds meaningful to you. But the movie, I put that on the movie. That wasn't in the movie. That's called eisegesis. When I have an idea and I put it into a text. But we're trying to do exegesis where we get an idea out of the text and it's fighting us. So what's the significance of that? Well, some people would say, this is depth. This is depth itself. If you don't like this, you don't like deep movies. I mean, here's something that is open to interpretation. But for me, there's a difference between this kind of open to interpretation and like the Inception spinning top open to interpretation. It's not that there are multiple ways to interpret it and the text was written in order to leave open both possibilities. This is just something that doesn't have anything inherent and you've got to put the value into it. But people will say, well, isn't the Bible that way? I mean, can't the Bible be interpreted however you want to? Can't you take the Bible and use it to justify slavery and then also take the Bible and use it to condemn slavery? And if we're going to enjoy anything in the Bible, aren't we really just going to have to make up our own story and engage it within the Bible? Aren't we just going to have to take Marxism or post-colonialism or queer theory or feminist theory and like put that with the Bible and do our own, play our own jazz? I would say no. I want to say no, but then I open up to books like Ezekiel, books that make no sense. And I have to ask, I mean, what's being done? Me, I stand firmly on the ground that says there is some interpretation, that there is some authorial intent, there is some right way to interpret text, something great that a great text says, and that's what makes the text great. And if I don't understand what Ezekiel says, and Ezekiel is great, that means that sometime later, if I study hard and I engage, I will be able to make sense of that most complicated, convoluted, incomprehensible book of the Bible. But I certainly appreciate the interesting thoughts that the Lighthouse has allowed us to have by having the opportunity to come together and to ask that question. So maybe there is some important function in a text that seems deep, that boggles the mind, and that just inspires speculation.
And when in scenes of glory I sing